It's my pleasure now to welcome on former North Melbourne and Carlton footballer, Corey McKernan. Corey, thanks for joining me today.
Hello, mate. How you going?
Good, thank you. Good, thank you. So I guess the best place to start is to throw it all the way back. You're originally from the western suburbs of Melbourne. What was it like growing up there, and what was your first introduction to footy?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Gladstone Park, but ended up playing footy at West Meadows because all my cousins were involved at West Meadows Football Club. And I think for people that would have heard of West Meadows before, that there's myself and Dane Swan are probably the best products to come out of West Meadows. So, yeah, out in the northern suburbs in the Essendon District Football League. And, yeah, I think my first introduction into football, I think, was when I was 5 years old. I think at that time I went down and, apparently I still probably couldn't even write my name properly and had to sign up for West Meadows. Some people would say nothing's really changed. So,
I mean, when I grew up playing footy, I realised pretty quickly that I was no good. That obviously probably wasn't the case for you. At what age did you sort of start to realise that, okay, I've probably got a good chance at playing AFL football one day?
Yeah, I think mine's a bit of a unique situation because I played footy at West Meadows from when I was 5 till I was about 12 years old. And then, around about the age of 12 or 13, then I started playing golf. And I played golf from when I was 13 right through until I was about 17 years old. The only reason I ended up then started to play football again is because was at school, and all my mates are playing at school, and got involved in the I think it was like the year 9 and year 10. We'd play the other schools in the area, that sort of thing. And North Melbourne actually looked after our zone. So Rowan Robinson and Greg Miller used to come out, and Rowan Robinson used to umpire our games, which was quite funny because Rowan Robinson worked at the club, and then when I later went to North Melbourne, I think I got sent off about 3 or 4 times because I told Rowan Robinson to basically go and get fucked. So, look, it was a bit of a unique journey. And then the only reason that I did end up at North Melbourne, as I said, they looked after our school zones. And then I think Greg Miller might have said something to Dennis Pagan. And I think what happened then is that, Dennis was at me about coming down to the under-19s, and I didn't want a bar of it. I had no interest in playing footy. I was quite content of playing a bit of school footy, playing golf. It's a pretty good balance, I thought, and plus you get time off of school, which was even better. And it was only because Dennis, excuse me, said to me, he goes, look, he tried and tried. I remember seeing he had a shitbox Chimera. It was a silver Chimera, and it used to come down our court in Gladstone Park, and I used to see, I'd either see him coming or I know that he'd come, and I'd just go and hide at the house and tell mum, just tell him I'm not home. I don't want to speak to him. I wasn't being rude. I just didn't want to play footy.
Yeah.
In the end, he must have got me at a weak moment. And he said, oh, look, just come down. You go, see how you go. He goes, you only have to come and train Thursday, which, if you know Dennis, that is a no-no, that no one ever misses training. I didn't have to train Tuesday night. I trained Thursday, and played my first game in the under-19s at North Melbourne. And it's fair to say I had a decent day because I kicked 5 goals in the first quarter and ended up kicking 11. And that was really it. I suppose then I was at North Melbourne ever since then. I do remember Dennis's words on those days. He said, listen, son, I don't think you might not kick 11 goals ever again. And guess what? He was right.
Yeah. I can only imagine Dennis Pagan is an extremely hard man to say no to more than once.
Well, at that time, it was actually pretty easy because I just, I wasn't really, at that time, I was probably more a mad Collingwood supporter. I'd go to the footy, watch Collingwood. Like I said, I'd go and watch Collingwood around that time. We're talking around sort of the year that Collingwood won the flag in 1990. And, I was quite happy going to the footy, watch the Pies, go and play golf, had mates for Collingwood, we'd go to the footy. And then during the week, had school footy. That's a pretty good setup. You know what I mean? I didn't really need to complicate it by having to drive into Arden Street a couple of times a week and play under-19s footy. But look, once I got down there, that was more or less it. And to answer your question, as far as I don't reckon look, that first year under 19s, I still wasn't sold on playing footy.
Yeah.
That was 1991, 1992. I was in the reserves, like I did all the pre-season stuff, but I still wasn't that serious about footy. And it was only at the end of either sort of 92 going into 93 that I must have played a couple of good games late in the year. And then it was only Mark Roberts, funnily enough, who's not known for his training. Fridge and I started training together, like in the off season. And it was only then that I started to get serious. And my weight went from 87 kilos up to 97 kilos. Quite funny. I'm trying to put it on and Fridge is trying to lose it.
Yeah.
And then, like I had a great pre-season going into 1993, and then still remember it to this day that Australia Day 1993, we had a camp up at Puckapunyal, and I remember, this is the short version, I had pains in the guts. And I remember saying to the guys on the bus, I remember it was next to Sean Smith, I remember saying to Smitty, I go, Smitty, I don't know if you're right. We went up, we stayed in that night, slept in tents and all that sort of stuff. And I did not sleep a wink all night. The next day, the boys had to go out and run, and Wayne Schimmelbush and Johnny Law sort of didn't really believe me on face value that I was super crook. Anyway, cut a long story short, we get to Monday, which I still remember it to this day, was Australia Day 1993. Guns N' Roses were playing at Calder Park.
Yeah.
I had a ticket to go and see Guns N' Roses, and I'd ruptured my appendix, and I was, from all reports, you can actually die from it, because what happens, all the toxins end up going around your body, and all that weight from being 87 kilos up to 97 kilos, well, in the space of 5 days, I lost 10 kilos. So all that went in one foul swoop. So 1993 was a bit unique. I was playing catch up during the year. Remember, Dennis came to North Melbourne the start of 1993. So in the end, I think I was emergency something like 10 times that year. Like got back on track, was playing good footy. But remember that time you had Alex Ashenko, John Longmire, Wayne Carey. You know what I mean? You had an established...
A couple of good names.
But then, because I was emergency 10 times, I went into 1994 and said, right, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to make sure that I become that good. It's their problem, not mine. You know what I mean? I didn't want to go, I'm emergency, and that was my mentality. My mentality was, I'll become that good that they have to play me, and whoever they leave out, not my problem. And then, got in the start of 94. 94 was really like my first sort of full year in the seniors. I think I then played 23 or 24 games in that first year. What did I do? I lost the Rising Star. That was one thing along the way. Got done for tripping by hand. But no, those first few years, it was, I was always pretty lucky that I was pretty durable in terms of getting through games and getting through seasons. Like, I think 94 would have played 23 or 24 games. 95 would have played 24 games. 96 would have played 24 games. So you're pretty lucky that you're playing within the space of 3 years, you play 75 games now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was pretty fortunate from that point of view. When I did injuries, it seemed like I did them at the right time. The biggest one I did, I think, is when I dislocated my shoulder. That was at the end of the year, and that would have meant, like what happened to Wayne Carey, you're out for 10 or 12 weeks. But I was pretty durable when it came to playing the games. Whether I played him any good at certain times, up for debate. But I was always pretty lucky and durable. But I'd put that down, so I always prepared really well.
Let's go back to your first game, which was round 17, 93. What was that like after, say, being emergency for 10 weeks, finally getting that first game?
Yeah, I think anyone that goes into their first game, it's a whirlwind. Everything seems like it's moving at a million miles an hour. And I don't know, I just wanted when you look back in hindsight, it's just an experience that you want to get it over and done with and move on to your second game. Like, if you can manage to do a few good things, you're still finding your place. And, probably a lot of the time, being a bigger player, you're sort of probably standing back, and rather than going and just fly for your marks, I think you're just trying to work out ways of, I'm trying to get by, and you know what I mean? But like I said, I think my overwhelming emotion was that everything was moving quick, and you're out in the MCG, and but it's like I said, I think it's one of those experiences. When I look back at it, was it super enjoyable? Probably not. But then I don't know. I think it held you in good stead because you got it out the way and you knew what to expect going into the following year.
Yeah. Do you remember your real sort of like, not oh shit moment, or like a welcome to the AFL moment, like whether it was a player sledging you or, someone putting you on your ass and you were just like, all right, I'm not playing resis anymore?
Not really, because when it comes to sledging, we're world class. No one would even get near North Melbourne as far
Yeah.
as being able to hang shit on each other. Like the shit that we used to hang on each other.
Mm.
So if an opposition tried, you want to be really, really good at it, because the shit that we would hang on each other. And you know what? It was also a strength of what North Melbourne was about, that everyone was equal. So the amount of shit that I could hang on Wayne Carey was, even as a kid, was he'd give it to me back, and vice versa. But also, if you weren't that good at, you'd want to get good at it really quickly, or else you didn't survive at North Melbourne.
Let's go into sort of the next phase there, the 95 to 96. You mentioned that 94 is sort of where you really, took things a lot seriously, but 95 and 96 is where you really exploded as a player. You made an All-Australian team in 96, won the league MVP, in a year where North won the grand final. But the one thing that people probably remember is the Brownlow. Now that you sort of long removed from it, can you sort of sit back and acknowledge that that was an unbelievable fucking year, despite the fact that you don't have the Brownlow?
Yeah, it was. I think the whole theme, a lot of that year was, we were on a bit of a mission anyway. Like in terms of we'd been knocked out in 94, 95. Like 94 was a goal after the siren by Gary Ablett, and then 95. Well, we played Carlton, who were probably not going to get beaten by anyone. But going into 96, we were all on a bit of a mission. But I know for me personally, it was sort of, once it got to that point in the year, you wanted to win a premiership medal for like Anthony Rock, Darren Crocker, Craig Scholl, guys that have been at North Melbourne for a long time. Well, that was my personal focus. And it probably, I don't know, I think from an enjoyable football year, because you were trying to win a medal for other people, that's what made it so satisfying. But look, when it comes to Brownlow, I was talking to Harry Unlick, our great North Melbourne doctor that we used to have, and I was even saying to Harry, I go, Harry, I wouldn't trade the way I handled the whole grand final week for the Brownlow medal, because of when I look at it, when I look at the week as a whole, what I had to deal with as a 22-year-old. On the Saturday, I hurt my knee in the prelim final, hurt my posterior cruciate. And Harry even said to me yesterday when I spoke to him, he goes, I don't know whether you remember telling you that you will probably not play in the grand final. And it's also a big lesson for anyone that if you make your mind up, I already made my mind up as soon as I was hurt. I was playing. There was no shadow. There was not one iota of a chance that I was going to miss not playing in the grand final. So that happened on the Saturday. Obviously on the Monday, you have the Brownlow medal. That happened on the Tuesday. In actual fact, I did actually get the Brownlow medal because Anthony Rock and Wayne Carey, McDonald's had a promotion that year where you could, if you bought a meal deal, you could get a particular medal. So you could win a Norm Smith, you could get a Coleman. So they stopped and got me a Brownlow medal, and with the blue and white ribbon through it, which I've only just packed up in my office. I've still got it. I've still kept it because it came from the guys you played footy with and respected.
Yeah.
That meant just as much to me than getting it from the umpires, with the greatest respect to the Brownlow medal. So that was on the Tuesday. Wednesday, again, Harry and I spoke about it yesterday. I went into Vimy House and I had about 40 or 50 mils of blood drained out of my knee. And even I do distinctly remember Harry, when we were sitting on the table, and he did look at me and said, I don't know whether this is a really good idea that you play. And I sort of said some colourful language to Harry and said, no, I'm definitely going to play. Trained Thursday night. Had the parade, and then to come out in the grand final, excuse me, come out in the grand final and had 31 possessions in the grand final. And as a 22-year-old, to have all that thrown at you and still come out and perform under pressure, that's better than winning the Brownlow medal.
Well, 100%. And sort of the next question I was going to ask is, at such a young age, you were, at that point in time, obviously that season, one of the most influential players in the AFL. How did you sort of handle that? Put the injury aside, how do you handle the pressure from that? Going like, you're not Wayne Carey, but you could take this game by the nuts and basically almost run away with it or make a big dent into it.
It wasn't probably just me, but it was probably just a feeling that, and probably all teams have this anyway. Like I remember there were different games that we'd play as soon as you'd run around the centre square, and whether this is cocky or arrogant or whatever you want to say, or just self-belief, that I remember there were certain times if I was running and I'm running next to Wayne Carey, and then you look around, you got Glenn Archer, Mick Martin, David King, Wayne Swass, Anthony Stevens running around, and it's, when you're running around with that group that's got that same mentality, it did make you think that we were going to be incredibly tough to beat during that period. You know what I mean? It was very, very fortunate to be able to come to North Melbourne at that time, and to, again, it's never ever going to be repeated when you think about it. You're going to have so many guys that came through the under-19s. You know what? Now that I say it, the only thing that's probably is a parallel close from a youth system is maybe like Manchester United when they had Beckham, Scholes, Nicky Butt, all these guys come through together, that they came through together on this shared journey, and in the end they have a leader like a Dennis Pagan or an Alex Ferguson, then puts the finishing touches on it. We were really lucky that we had that group that we came through together.
Yeah, sport is such a business that sort of thing is just, especially in soccer, it's just not existent anymore. You see like a lot of these second tier English clubs have, really good youth programs, and then the big dogs just come out with the textbooks and just sort of just poach guys. So it is pretty cool when you think about it from that point of view. And I wish the AFL still did that, under 19 thing. I think that would be cool.
It is interesting. It's amazing that we've done all this, and it is interesting. I think one day, who knows, we've now ended up with nearly like a quasi AFL reserves. And I think as fans, we're all we're all missing that experience of, I'm happy to go to the footy 2 hours earlier because I'll go and sit there and I'll watch a kid that's going to come through, and I can go along with the journey with him. I can see where he's going. I remember a lot of people had that with me, that they'd go to the footy and they'd make it a point that they want to see what's coming up from underneath. Whereas now, I think it's lost a bit in terms of that, like where you can't go to the footy. I know it's a national competition, but I think it'd be really cool if they did get the under-19s back, because to be under that one club umbrella and to come through the system, it's not only great for the players, but I think it's great for the fans.
I can think back to when I was a lot younger. My dad's a diehard Richmond fan, and I, remember going with him to games where they'd watch the reserves or the under-19s, whatever you call it, at Punt Road, and then you walk over to the G, and like the VFL is kind of sort of making strides towards that with what they've done, adding teams in New South Wales and Queensland. But I think the COVID has sort of made that a bit of a nightmare too. But hopefully one day it would be really good to see that sort of thing back in the AFL. 96, you win your first flag. A few years later, 99, you win your second one. How was that experience compared to the first one? Because obviously you've gone through the whole hoopla with the Brownlow and the knee and everything and all that sort of experience. Now you got your second one. Was that a more relaxed week? Was that somewhere you're more focused, or was that sort of relatively similar?
Oh no, look, when you're playing the grand final, I don't think it is a great experience to go through. You want to be able to savor it. I was always someone, and all my finals record sort of backs that up, that I was always someone, the bigger the game, the bigger the occasion, the better I played. Mm-hmm. So when it came to grand final week, I had a really good balance of, I was able to take it in, but still be able to focus on what I needed to do to be able to play well. We played in 3, I think 98. I didn't really play that well in the 98 grand final. So then, look, 99 for us, to answer your question, I think it was more a sense of a relief as a club after, when you throw away a premiership like we did in 1998, when you kick 2 goals, 11 in the second quarter against the Adelaide Crows. Like, we kicked 2-11. So if we kick 5 goals 8 or 6 goals 7. That game is completely over. It's shot to bits. And it's funny, you don't know whether if we had a 1 in 98, would we have won in 99? You really don't know. You know what I mean? So I think the overriding emotion as far as them winning it was more of it's elation, but it was more a sense of relief that you hadn't lost.
You know, before you win that 99 flag, say just after you've lost the one at Adelaide, you also don't know when you're going to get back to, you know, to that, have that opportunity. Like, you know, you look at St Kilda. St Kilda, you know, they draw that grand final with Collingwood, then lose it. And then obviously they've been in a bit of a free fall ever since. You just sort of never know when you're going to get that opportunity again.
I think, I think for us, 3 flags should have been par. I think 2, don't get me wrong, 2 is good. But I think for how good that team was and how consistent it was, like we played in 7 straight prelims. And it probably just goes to show how hard it is to actually make the grand final. The prelims are always harder than the grand final. Yeah. Like once you're in, you felt, well, you're in, you know what I mean? But it's that whole thing of playing in the prelim final and not getting ahead of yourself at any point. And it's such a weird feeling when you don't make the grand final after you played in the prelim because you're so far away, but then you've got to watch everyone else go through that experience of grand final week. And once you know what that's like, it's a pretty hollow feeling when I don't know what's worse, losing the grand final or not even making it in the first place.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that losing the prelim is worse than losing the grand final because you're sort of sat there for the next 6 months with the what if. You know, you look at the team that goes on and wins the grand final and you're like, oh shit, we beat them twice, or they weren't that good that day. We know we had that. And it's, you know, if you don't have it on the day of the grand final, like, you know, Port Adelaide fan against Geelong, like you don't have it, but not actually having the opportunity, like sometimes can eat people up.
Oh, look, the only difference between losing a prelim and losing a grand final, they're both crushing, but then the one that takes it to the next level is you don't want to be on the MCG in front of 100,000 people and you've lost the game. That's the biggest kicker with that one, that when you've lost the game and you're sitting there, and especially like with us, 98 was our best team. It is easily our best team on paper. When you look at the 3 teams that played in the grand finals for North Melbourne, 98 is by far and away the best team on paper.
A few years after 99, you were traded to Carlton. Now, Carlton were at sort of a very different spot to North Melbourne at that point. Was that difficult for you to be traded from the club that, you know, is all you knew, and then go to, you know, a team that was relatively on a different wavelength, you could say?
Yeah, well, I made the decision. I went to the club and said I wanted to go, and then it was interesting. There were a couple of clubs that were pretty keen. I think Geelong was pretty keen at that point. Geelong, Carlton, maybe. I think Geelong and Carlton were the 2 that sort of were the ones that were pretty keen. And then, obviously, I then made the choice to go to Carlton. And look, I think the big thing at that point was that Carlton weren't used to not winning. So when I first went there, they'd come off of, they'd been in the finals a couple of years in a row, not too far out of losing the grand final against North Melbourne anyway. So it was still coming off the back of like a Carlton of old, so to speak, that they were still successful. They were still winning games, still playing in finals. And then that first year was, when the shit hit the fan. All the salary cap stuff had happened. And look, I think it was just such a shock for Carlton fans that it's been so used to being successful, winning premierships, to all of a sudden you're not winning. And then for someone that came out from the outside of myself, the first 5 or 6 rounds at Carlton were pretty ugly. I know I hadn't been playing that well myself, but for me, again, that's probably up there with one of the best things I've ever done, to be able to show that resilience and fight. And I still distinctly remember the conversation I had with Wayne Britton. I think I hadn't been playing well and we were coming up to a game. I was last off the training track. I think I'd done some extra goal kicking or something, and Wayne Britton was walking off with me. And again, it made me think of even even when Luke Longley the other day, when you just hear a bit of a positive comment from someone, the difference it can make. He heard that from Michael Jordan. Now, I heard mine from Wayne Britton. He goes, listen, they can burn the grandstands down, but he goes, I'm not going to drop you. So even for me, my first thought was, hang on, I can't let him down. It wasn't about me. It was, I can't let him down. And that's where it all clicked and turned. And then I turned around and won the best and fairest. So to be able to do that when early days at Carlton was pretty hairy, in terms of the crowd was pretty savage on everyone. We're coming off the ground, we're getting beaten. I remember there were games where I got Bronx cheers with the fans and all that sort of stuff. And to be able to then come back and win the best and fairest, and then ultimately win the respect of the Carlton fans was pretty satisfying.
Carlton fans at the best of times can be extremely brutal on their own.
Yeah, well, if you reckon Richmond fans eat their own, I reckon Carlton fans are pretty. Look, but I get it. Any big club like that, it's also a part of why they're also successful, because they got high standards, and you want that.
Yeah.
Whether it then translates into sometimes they go too far, well, then that's up for debate. But it's also what makes these clubs ultra successful, and Carlton will end up being like what Richmond have then found about themselves over the last 7 to 10 years. They'll discover their DNA, they'll tap back into that. But in terms of Carlton fans, it's been a real tough period for them, no doubt.
After your time at Carlton, you went back to North for a season to finish up your career. Was that special to go back there and sort of finish your career at the club where it all started?
Not really. It took that much out of me from a mental point of view. So the first year I won the best and fairest at Carlton. The second year, that's when Dennis came from North Melbourne to Carlton. Mm-hmm. Now, Dennis and I are on great terms nowadays. But for me, for someone that left North Melbourne because I wanted to get away from Dennis and then have him turn up after I won the best and fairest, that year, 2003, was, not a good year. And honestly, it took so much out of me from a mental point of view.
Yeah.
For someone that had gone somewhere, got the runs on the board, which I still had formed all great relationships and with people at the club and win the best and fairest. And then when Dennis came, it was like everything I'd done had just ended. And to have to pick yourself off the ground and then try and find a way to make it work, it was honestly, it would have been a miracle if it had worked, like in terms of me being able to keep playing well and that relationship I had with Dennis. And after the first year, I left and went back to North Melbourne. But truth be known, I probably should have. It took that much out of me from a mental point of view. I honestly should have probably retired then, because it was just so draining what it had taken out of me. And I know it was disappointing in a way, because I'd gone there and won a best and fairest. I felt like going into that next year, I nearly felt like after my first year at Carlton, I nearly started to think, well, hang on, maybe if I keep going with this, I can actually be captain of this place. Like I can, but like I said, it really, the momentum and the best example I can give, it's no different with yourself, right? That if you left an employer, you didn't like being there, and yet you go to a new job, you become successful, and yet your old boss turns up.
I wouldn't be thrilled.
So I found out Dennis was going to come to Carlton, when I was flying back in from New Zealand. And this is the short version, the clean version, but I gave the guy my passport at Tullamarine Airport. And I gave the guy my passport, and he looked at it and he goes, gee, you'll be happy with your new coach. So that's how I found out that Dennis was going to come to...
I don't think I will be.
And that impressed the hell out of me at that point. But look, like I said, I've always said it like this, and that's why I think Dennis and I have got a much better relationship now. And unlike other people that have actually come out and bagged Dennis publicly, I'm not going to name them, but there's been a couple of people that have. I just said, and I've always maintained this, mine was always about, we didn't get the best out of one another, and that was it. There was nothing else nothing less. And I mean,
Wasn't personal.
I was also respectful of the fact, hey, we won flags together too. So, I mean, but whereas I know there are other people out there that put it in their book and put it in the paper and went too far in terms of, I mean, if you got anything to say like that, I think, sometimes either better less unsaid, or if you're going to say it, go and say it to the person directly.
Talk about, sort of stepping away from footy and looking at your career as a whole. We've sort of mentioned the fact 2 flags, MVP, All Australian. What's your biggest takeaway, now that you can sit back and look on your career as a whole?
I think the big one for me was I know that when we had our biggest games and biggest occasions, I know that I stood up the tallest, if not like as tall as anyone. And whether that was Friday night footy, whether that was big finals games, they were never an issue for me. There was, and then I don't know. I think, would I have liked to have been more consistent? Probably, but how can you trade the fact that if you are a player and you want to be known as a great player? I'm not calling myself a great player, but by the way, but I think if you really want to be considered a really good player, if you can play well in finals and big occasions, you can't ask for much more. And I don't, I'm only in my office when I look at, some of the stuff that I've got and whatever. It is great to know that you've probably contributed greatly to the history of the North Melbourne Footy Club.
Those games are the one, the average punters like myself remember. I couldn't tell you much about Josh Marnie's AFL career outside of the fact when in the grand final in 2004, he, dove and made a great play to keep the ball in and knocked it to, I can't remember who, but someone running and kicked a goal. It's those sort of, little moments or performances in big games that, people really do remember. So I think that's...
I always say that with AFL grand final day, you know what you're going to get out of your stars. You already know that. You already know that if we were playing a game next week and Geelong were playing Western Bulldogs, we know what we're getting out of Bontempelli. We know what we're getting out of Dangerfield. We know what we're getting. But what I look for and what determines the grand final is each guy is going to have a moment where it could be, like you said, a smother, or it could be just a simple set shot at goal. You're going to have that one moment, and you think about it, the team that have more of those moments are the team that invariably wins the game. And that's the way that grand final day goes. There's too many stories of no different to what I said. We kicked 2 goals, 11. You don't deserve to win the grand final. But great grand final moments when you think about it, like it could have been Cyril Rioli on the wing when he had 3 or 4 efforts, or Stuart Dew in that 2008 grand final, or Marnie, as you said, or in our grand final, Glenn Freeborn had three kicks in the second quarter. They're all goals.
Let's get out of footy. At the height of lockdown last year, you started a project called Walk With Me Online. This promotes physical and mental well-being by basically getting people out of the house and sort of, not keeping them isolated. Talk about the project and sort of why it was important for you to start it.
Oh, look, to be brutally honest, I saw a headline in the Australian newspaper that the suicide toll was going to outstrip the coronavirus toll. Unfortunately, that's proven true. But then I thought at that time, what can I actually do? I think we're so much better at having conversations in and around mental health nowadays, which is fantastic. But then I thought, what can I actually do? Like, what can I do that's, something a bit different? And around that time, obviously Zoom, what we're doing now. And I thought, well, hang on, if we can, and a part of also with me is that I've always physically trained. So then I thought, well, hang on, if we can walk and talk, use Zoom, go for a Zoom walk. And then that's the way it all started. I just started doing Zoom walks on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7 a.m. And it was really just to get people up and about, get them moving. Because I also thought, well, hang on, one of the stuff I've done, I know that if I always train, I always feel better. And then if I can add, whether it's conversations with a Wayne Swass or David Butterford, that's our fitness advisor at the Kangaroos during the 90s, or Wayne Carey or Jason McCartney, if they can hear stories from these guys and pick up little habits, And that's what I always say, if they can come on one of the Zoom walks or watch a live interview, I've done many live interviews like this. If people can just pick up little bits and pieces, it's like a bit of a buffet, really, that some ideas they might hear are no good, but then other stuff, if they can add that to their own lives, it's going to better help them with their physical and mental fitness. Well, we've succeeded.
Speaking of the interviews, you haven't just had, someone like me who hasn't, achieved, 4/5 of fuck all. You've had people like, Lee Matthews, James Hird, John Daly, Mark Leishman, Merv Hughes, and I could name another 20 elite sporting names like that. What have you taken away from those guys personally?
Look, I'm very, very lucky that everyone I get to interview, you're picking up again. It's exactly what I said. I'm hoping what people pick up from watching them. So if I'm then interviewing a Lee Matthews, I'm picking up little bits and pieces of habits or things that he's done. The two most powerful ones I think that I've done, excuse me, definitely probably Wayne Carey and James Hird. And whilst everyone else, you pick up so much great information, but I just loved at the core of what we're trying to achieve, if we can hear from guys like this that are pretty much superstars, revered by people. We're talking about James Hird and Wayne Carey, right? Now, both of them had their troubles over the journey, but to hear them saying that they'd gone to work on themselves, I think it's great advice for anyone. And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Wayne Carey or James Hird or anyone, you can always try and do some work on yourselves. And to hear those guys being refreshingly honest and say what they've done to help themselves, I think was great for anyone that's going through a tough time during the lockdown.
Yeah, 100%. I watched the James Hird one last night, and it hit me quite a bit because, we're talking about a man who probably in the last 10 so years in footy has been hammered more than anyone. And in the day and age where we are with the media and how almost everything gets picked up, we could talk for 3 hours here and you could say one sentence and then I could run with that one sentence and then the whole conversation gets, thrown out. I was amazed at how sort of, open and honest he was and sort of vulnerable and just sort of, just let it fly.
Yeah, look, I think it is the same with North and Essendon. Look, at the end of the day, North and Essendon hate one another, or as in from the fans, and there's a massive rivalry there, but there is a huge amount of respect between both the teams. And that's what even came through with Hirdy, I think, from the start, that during the 90s, we were a bit of rivals, that they were Essendon, we were North, and we had some great encounters. But he was probably, with the greatest respect to everyone else, it was probably nearly my favourite interview to do the James Hird one, because I didn't know how it was going to go. And to hear, like you mentioned, James open up like he did, I felt like I loved it because it was so needed in today's environment. To hear someone like that, to feel like he's always been able to solve a problem, and him and Wayne Carey, they can usually solve any sort of problem, like as in whether it's been off the field, like him with James with his businesses, or on the field, they're so used to solving the problem themselves. But then to hear even them open up, and in particular Hirdy, and saying that was one of the biggest things that messed with his mind, is that he felt like a failure because he wasn't able to solve these problems. Well, hey, that's what everyone often feels like. And to hear him say that, I think it's great advice for anyone. But in particular, I think what I wanted was not only, we talked about a problem, but more importantly, we had a solution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's incredible. Do you think that type of conversation is having it in semi-public eye was something that was probably extremely helpful for him?
I think it would be. Look, I think someone like James Hird is too good of a football mind and a football person to be not heard from, pardon the pun, not to be heard from more often. Like he's a legend of Essendon, 2-time premiership player, he's a Brownlow medalist. He should. You want to see people like James Hird back in the fold, and he will. It just takes time. Same as what happened with Wayne Carey initially. Like he went through a tough time initially about, being able to feel like he could go back to North Melbourne, but now I mean, a lot of water's got under the bridge, and I mean, it can obviously, like many times, he's been back to the football club. So
Outside of the interviews and the podcasts that you do, you also hold in-person events. I know it's very hard in Australia at the moment to sort of make plans for those sort of things, but is that sort of, where you want to take things sort of moving forward with the project?
well, I did events for a number of years, and to be brutally honest, doing a lot of corporate hospitality, I got to the point I found it pretty unfulfilling. But I don't mind. Here's the thing: I don't mind doing some live events with Walk With Me, because I know what the cause it's going to.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
actually feels like it's got more of a purpose. But whereas when I was doing corporate hospitality, seriously, to sell corporate tickets, you're the one who's making the money, and it's hard and it's tough. But I don't know, if there's only a limited amount of events, and that's what the live events do help. It's not only about, that we can get some money to help run the business, but it's also, it promotes the awareness in terms of what we're doing as well. So it does feel like it's a lot more purposeful doing the way we're doing them with Walk With Me.
Yeah, sure. We'll finish up with just a couple here. One that I probably should have mentioned before. You've got a brother, Sean, who currently plays for St Kilda, played for Adelaide and Essendon, I believe, as well. What's it been like watching him play over the years?
I know, you just look, I think all throughout Sean's career, I've tried to, when I've got advice or I feel like I can say something, I will, but I don't, it's not as if I get on the phone every week and pick apart his game and am I in his face. But if I felt like in different games I'd seen something or whatever, I'd easily ring him and try and, just no different to how we're having a chat now. It's not as if I'll launch straight into it and go, oh, what about this and whatever. And I'll go, well, yeah, you just look, he's over the journey. I know that he's put a hell of a lot of time and effort into it, but sometimes, look, I was maybe pretty lucky that I was able to play 20 odd games a year every single year. But whereas Sean, whether it's been suspension or whether it's been injury or form or anything, just hadn't been able to get a lot of continuous footy out of him. But look, at the end of the day, anyone that plays AFL footy for a long period of time, I think regardless of what happens, it's going to hold him in good stead for the rest of his life in terms of the habits and things that you pick up out of playing high-level sport.
We'll finish off on this one. You mentioned before that you're a big golfer, and golf was a big part of your early life. What was the biggest thing you took away from chatting to John Daly?
Look, it's really weird for me now, because John now is actually a mate, and which is actually quite strange for someone that grew up loving golf. That he actually rang me not long ago, and I was driving into Brisbane, and it was about 6 o'clock in the morning our time. So 6 in the morning our time. So it's late in the afternoon in America. And like, he rings me, and I could tell that they'd had a few, and there was him and another Aussie guy and Kid Rock. And I'm driving into Brisbane. I'm thinking, how surreal is this? I'm like,
what a crew.
he rings me up, and they basically I ended up spoke to Kid Rock for 5 minutes, which I thought was cool as fuck. But I don't know. Look, I've been really fortunate with one thing I'm really big on, I think, whether in business or life or whatever, it's the relationships you got. And I got a lot of people that I dealt with over the journey, and I'm really big on not ever trying to burn a bridge or anything like that. But the people I've met, whether it's been John Daly overseas, and we met Mark Leishman and Cam Smith, Jason Day, who else? Like, even in the NFL, meeting Marshawn Lynch that came out for a Super Bowl party. Like, they're actually just good guys. But look, in particular, John, I've always got a bit of a soft spot for, because I always say that he should have been an Australian. Like, with his sense of humour, he's got an Australian sense of humour, and that's why we all love him. He's rough around the edges, but in the end, he's got a really good heart. He reminds me a lot of Brendan Favola.
Yeah.
He's got that same, there's something about him that you love. We know that they're rough around the edges. We know that every now and again, we'll touch wood for Feb that nothing happens, but
yeah,
we know that they've mucked up a few times, but you know what? We love them.
Yeah. No, that's it. Look, Corey, thank you very much for coming on, mate. That was a lot of fun jumping through your career, and you're an incredible player, and all the best with everything sort of moving forward.
No, thank you. And let's hope the Kangas get some more wins, though. Hopefully not 2 more wins. We just want to put the key back in the rack now and just
win next year.
Nah, but look, we didn't really talk about that. But I'll tell you what, I was talking to someone. I was again talking to Harry Unlick. So Harry's got a few plugs today.
Hopefully,
actually saying outside of North actually being in the finals and winning your premiership, I actually don't think their year could have gone as good as what it's gone. Like I think in terms of we found, I can't remember in my lifetime finding as many players this year as what we have. Like Taron Thomas has finally come of age. You got Zerha that's really stepped it up. Davies Uniacke, Larky, once he puts on, I reckon 3 or 4 more kilos and gets a bit more.
Yeah, he's going to be trouble.
Yeah, so look, it's exciting times. And look, the best thing is it shuts up all the naysayers. You got 45,000 members. I believe we're going to be debt free. Now, any of this conversation as far as North Melbourne going to Tassie can politely fuck off. Like it ain't happening. So, no, look, I just think it's fantastic for the club that for so long, our biggest fear was about finishing on the bottom and we're going to lose so much money. Now we've come through back-to-back pandemics. We finally took our medicine and we bottomed out. And we said, right, we're starting again, doing it the right way. And David Noble's done a fantastic job. It looked a bit hairy at the start of the year, but I love it. I think it's like the reserves of what we were saying before, to be able to see these kids developing, and in the end, now they're starting to develop a bit of brashness and taking on the game. More importantly for me, they're playing in what I deem a North Melbourne way. When North Melbourne play that style of game, every club's got its own DNA. So does North. But you know that when North Melbourne play well, they take the game on. They're bold. They're brash. They don't care who the opposition is, and that's what is North Melbourne.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the job that David Noble was given at the start of the year was probably one that no other coach was given, and what he's been able to do, despite the hairy start, is absolutely phenomenal. So all the best for the Kangas. Hopefully, obviously, you get a good pick here, and then moving forward.
No, look, it's exciting times, and look, the great thing is, I think now we're not relying on this whole we want to land a big fish mentality. Like, isn't it funny now? No one's even talking about that stuff anymore. About we've got to go and get a Josh Kelly, or we've got to get a Dustin Martin, or I mean, in the end, we're probably going to need money in our bank we're going to get to the point that some of these kids are going to have to get paid as well. So,
yeah, well, I mean, I think that's I think development, the money in development, like you look at a team like Richmond, who have just developed so many of these stars, like Shai Bolton's just signed on. I think you could make a very, very strong case for not going after as good as a player like Martin and Kelly are. Are they going to put you in a spot, in say 1 or 2 years, where if you spend that money on say 4 or 5 players that in say 4 or 5 years are really going to make a massive impact into where you're going to be?
Well, the good thing is, at least you see how these guys go. You then work out in 2 or 3 years' time what you actually really need, rather than doing it in reverse. It's no use ending up with someone and you're stuck with a contract. Whereas now the way that North have actually done it now compared to in the past, they're now going to go, okay, well, we've got these good kids. Who knows, in 2 years' time, then we can go and spend a lot of money because you know specifically what you need that'll get you to that real next level. And the next level is you want to get a 5th premiership.
No, that's it. I'll ask you one more question to help me solve a long-standing debate I had with many people. Josh Walker has to be one of the most underrated players in the AFL. Correct or false?
I think he is. I think even when he was at Brisbane, I liked him. I remember I called a lot of games, Lions games, and I liked I love his flexibility.
Yeah,
I think
100%.
How a team could let him look. Brisbane had an abundance of probably those tools. But for us, that ability to have a swingman like that can go back and forward, it's a valuable commodity as a player. And I've always liked him. He's great overhead. Is he consistent? Maybe sometimes he can get a little inconsistent. But overall, I really like his game. He's been a really good pickup.
No, that's it. You can't argue with a contested mark like that. So thank you for proving me right. And thank you again for the chat, mate. It was a lot of fun.
Not a problem. All right. See you, mate.